Well, welcome back. Thursday, January 23rd, 2019. Sometimes, as you know, I like to go back a year and see what we were talking about exactly a year ago. What were the hot issues, what I was saying in my monologue, what people were consumed with. Here's how fast things move. Do you recall that a year ago, Nancy Pelosi, in the midst of a government shutdown, disinvited the president from giving his State of the Union address? Who remembers that? And people tell me Democrats aren't about trying to curb and curtail Republican speech. Of course, Trump ended up giving his State of the Union. The shutdown ended and Pelosi relented. But that's what they are about. And who recalls this? It was only a year ago. Have things changed? Yep. The Democrats have upped the stakes. They saw Russia, and not in their backyard. They saw Russia as the country Donald Trump colluded with to win the 2016 election. Finding out that that never actually happened, that it was fully untrue from the Mueller investigation, they put their fingers in the wind and went, aha! It wasn't Russia that shows Donald Trump's corruption. It's Russia's sworn enemy, Ukraine. Stop everything. Turn on a dime. And let's try and convince the American people of this. Why? Because, as Al Green said, as Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez said, if Donald Trump is not removed from office via impeachment, he'll be reelected. Boy, that whole democracy thing, that whole vote thing, it's a bear, isn't it? The idea others may disagree with you on your policy position really irks, doesn't it? The idea must irk, because you won't let the people decide. Now, you tell me who, in the words of Joe Biden, if I may, is presenting an existential threat to the Constitution. Now, you tell me, in the words of Jerry Nadler and Nancy Pelosi, if I might, who's causing a constitutional crisis. Now, you tell me, in the words of every Democrat in office, including Hillary Clinton, who's causing voter suppression. You know the rule. If you want to know what Democrats are up to, just look at what they accuse us of doing. And of course, too many self-styled spokesmen and deep thinkers for the conservative movement do not understand any of this. One questions whether they get that the courts and defense and foreign policy are important to us, but can only be taken up if we win elections, namely, especially the presidency. One questions that of them. One questions whether the economy matters to them, and if they understand we can only fix it if we win elections, namely, especially the presidency. But one also now has to question if they don't understand how the Democrats play this game I've alluded to above. When they saw Democratic Party ads showing a black man being dragged to death by racist criminals and blamed George W. Bush for that in 2000, were they not clued in just a bit? Heck, in 1964, when Fact magazine published a cover story article saying 1,189 psychiatrists claim Barry Goldwater is mentally unfit to be president, were they not clued in just a bit? When the infamous Daisy ad was unveiled showing Barry Goldwater responsible for ending the Earth via nuclear explosion, were they not clued in just a bit? How about the Mondale ad against Ronald Reagan in 1984 showing kindergarten children watching the world explode due to nuclear weapons launched by Ronald Reagan, all with the backdrop of the music of Crosby, Stills, and Nash playing Teach Your Children Well? Were they not clued in just a bit? On and on I could go, but all of that culminates to now. The frightening of Americans by using the most graphically scarisome images and scenery. It hasn't worked for them before. Americans weren't buying it and don't buying it. We're generally a calm people that don't react like college students or Antifa members. So just take out the guy who can win by looking to remedies like impeachment over what Ted Cruz rightly calls less than a traffic infraction. Still don't believe me or this story? How about yesterday? House Intelligence Chairman and impeachment manager Adam Schiff said it verbatim in his opening case. Quote, "The president's misconduct cannot be decided at the ballot box, for we cannot be assured that the vote will be fairly won." Close quote. Let me repeat. The president's misconduct cannot be decided at the ballot box. Let's break that down. First, it is peremptory at best to label the president's actions as misconduct. Note that rhetorical trick of Adam Schiff's. He assumes a fact not in evidence to reach a conclusion that's extreme. A lot of people, from the president to, say, 197 Republicans in the House of Representatives, all of them, they don't think the president engaged in quote-unquote misconduct. Neither does the president of Ukraine. And neither do seemingly some 47% of the American people. I want you to really think about that a second before we get to the second part of what Adam Schiff said. The president's misconduct cannot be decided at the ballot box. The misconduct is unproven. Even if all the allegations are proven, and an awful lot of people, tens of millions of them, well, they still don't think it's misconduct. And despite this, Adam Schiff says we cannot have an election. We cannot put Donald Trump in front of the American people to decide whether or not they want him as their president. I don't know how, in the name of all that is normal or commonsensical, this very statement alone does not require a universal lambasting of Adam Schiff by every editorial page in the country. I don't know how, in the name of all that is normal or commonsensical, this very statement alone doesn't delegitimize every claim any Democrat makes about Donald Trump putting the Constitution and the future of America at risk. For if Adam Schiff is to be taken seriously, all one has to do in the future is have a Democratic Party president Republicans don't like, claim the president did something that amounts to misconduct, and then because of such misconduct, say we cannot afford a normal election or vote. We cannot allow the American people to decide who they want for the presidency. That's the precedent Adam Schiff and the Democrats are setting. Now let's go to the second part of what Adam Schiff said. For we cannot be assured that the vote will be fairly won. Let's walk back that just a moment, shall we? First, I get that with enough smoke and mirrors and allegations, one can claim the Russians intervened and infected, if not affected, our elections in 2016. Turns out they tried, but they didn't affect. But if they did, on whose watch was that? Was not Barack Obama the president? Was not Joe Biden the vice president? Was not Loretta Lynch the attorney general? Was not James Comey the director of FBI? Was not James Brennan the director of the CIA when this took place? If they Russians could have done this, whose fault was that? On whose watch did it happen? But for years, we put Donald Trump and his campaign team through the ringer for facilitating the interference, only to find out that it didn't happen. So now we have the Democrats telling us, of a sudden, that we cannot vouchsafe and secure this November's elections. Are there any elections they trust? Are there any elections they trust for the American people to make up their own minds about? The answer now turns out to be a resounding no. For not only do they question the last election, they are now casting aspersions on the upcoming election. And the allegation from Democrats is Donald Trump is abnormal and not trusting the mechanisms and apparatuses of government. Pretty astounding to have this argument laid forth. Already, the 2020 elections are now tainted. Why make that point? Obviously, to prevent the vote, if possible, because they think Trump will win. And if they cannot prevent the vote and Trump does win, let's make his election illegitimate. Make you, the American people, illegitimate for your point of view. How progressive. I mean that not sarcastically. It is the progressive mindset that the people cannot be trusted. That a conservative worldview or viewpoint is an unenlightened one. That it is not allowed, in the words of Oliver Wendell Holmes, to give conservatives their chance and have their way. Or in other words, the words of Louis Brandeis, keep this in mind. Those who won our independence believed that the final end of the state was to make men free to develop their faculties, and that, in its government, the deliberative forces should prevail over the arbitrary. Deliberative forces prevailing over the arbitrary. Well, the progressives really don't believe that now, do they? They believe the unenlightened should not get their chances and have their way. But first, they label and libel us unenlightened. That's how they get there. You know, we who believe in competition and markets in all parts of life, that those things should determine outcomes. That is the unenlightened viewpoint today. We who believe with Abraham Lincoln that property is the fruit of labor, that property is desirable, that it's a positive good in the world, that some can be rich, shows that others may become rich, and hence is just encouragement? We who believe with Lincoln that it is best for all to leave each man free to acquire property as best he can? We who believe in the sanctity of life? We deserve, as Bernie Sanders campaign workers, not workers say, we deserve gulags. But one thing we don't get, one thing we don't deserve, free choice and free elections, free speech, or any other constitutional guarantee that might, just might, lead to points of view today's progressives can no longer abide. And so I give you today's charade. Meanwhile, let's get to it. We have 3 hours to do so. We've got a country to save. I'm Seth Leibsohn. We'll be right back. I'd like to take a moment to tell you about my friends at Guns Etc. They are true American patriots. They strongly support our president, and they have over 10,200 square feet of firearms and firearm accessories. Please take my advice and stop by their store, which is a symbol of American freedom, or visit them at gunsetcetera.com and have access to over $350 million in firearms merchandise.